Hello and welcome to Undivided. Thanks for being here. Thank you for your commitment to giving common sense a comeback. I'm Brandi Kruse. You can tell I'm all jazzed up today. Probably because this is my second double shot of espresso for the morning. But also, I don't know if you heard the news. Man, Governor Jay Inslee. I should have got my crow. Nicole, I can't reach. Yes, I can't reach my crow. I said a long time ago that Governor Jay Inslee, Nicole's going to pass in front of the camera because she's on a mission, that Governor Jay Inslee was not going to run for a fourth term. And I said if I was wrong, I would eat crow. But here's my crow. I won't eat you, little buddy, because like always, I'm always right. Always right. Hi, buddy. Governor Jay Inslee announced today that he is not seeking a fourth term in office. Now, I smile because I think that's very good for not only our state, because I disagree with a lot of what he's done, but nobody should run the state for 4 terms. Nobody should run the state for 4 terms. That's 16 years. We have more than 7 million people. Come on. And that's why there should be term limits on the governorship. But I'm also, Nicole, would jubilant describe my reaction? But I have a mixed opinion on it because of what we talked about last week, which is what is the alternative?
Right.
It's the devil you
yes,
don't know.
You screamed. I was actually in the bathroom when the news came out, and I heard you scream out here. An excitement that he was done.
Yeah. And I know that sounds mean. I'll put the crow away now. But I will not eat the crow. Should we read a part of his statement?
Yeah.
Let me read a little bit of it. It was pretty long. And look, it was so devoid of any sort of, what is the word I'm looking for? Self-awareness. But
as usual,
to be expected. So here is the statement that came out from the governor early on this morning. Let's read it in part. Serving the people as governor of Washington State has been my greatest honor. During a decade of dynamic change, we've made Washington a beacon for progress for the nation. I'm ready to pass the torch. Somebody said where were you reading that comment? Ready to pass the blowtorch.
Yeah.
Hopefully that's
Twitter.
not the case. He went on to say, as governor, I have seen my role as inspiring our state ever forward and even higher. Interesting. And I'm gratified to be able to say that this approach has worked to improve Washingtonians' lives in many ways, in many places, if you say so. He went on to say, now is the time to intensely focus on all we can accomplish in the next year and a half, and I intend to do just that, to which I say, please no. Please don't intensely focus on doing anything. He writes, I look forward to continued partnership with legislators and community leaders to address Washington's homelessness crisis, speed our efforts to expand behavioral health services, continue our fight against climate change, and continue making Washington a beacon of progress for all. If this is progress, I don't want any part of it. What is the speech that I've given this? I've regurgitated this speech a couple times. It's from Yellowstone. If you watch the series Yellowstone, and Kevin Costner, who's like the head of the Dutton family, he's running for governor, and he calls himself the wall that progress bashes against. And he says he will not break because he said that definition of progress that was being pushed on Montana was not progress at all. It was progress at any cost for any reason. And so if Governor Jay Inslee wants to spend the next year and a half continuing to make Washington a beacon of progress for all, that terrifies me. I would much rather he just sit at home on Bainbridge Island and wait for someone to take his job. But in honor of Governor Jay Inslee's 3 terms in office and his decision not to seek a fourth, I thought we would put together a little video montage of some of his most stellar moments.
Governor, I'd like to ask you about what's going on in Seattle. There's this thing called the Capitol Hill Autonomous Zone. What's your thought on that? The fact that the protesters have taken that over and not allowing people to come and go freely?
Well, that's news to me, so I'll have to reserve any comment about it. I have not heard anything about that.
What should voters make of the fact that you were apparently oblivious to police abandoning an entire precinct in the state's largest city?
Yeah, well, listen, if you look at the facts of that situation, I could not have been oblivious to it because I actually deployed the Washington State National Guard.
Sir, then why do you say you did not know about it?
You'll have to go back and look at some quote. I can't comment on the quote right now.
This is news to me. You went on to say, I haven't heard about it from any credible source nearly 2 days after CHOP happened. You're now saying you did know about CHOP.
Listen, I can't tell you, I knew about CHOP. The calls we have made have been very difficult, but they have succeeded. I'm not sure you want to go back and reform when you won the Super Bowl. And we've won the Super Bowl of the COVID pandemic. Unfortunately, we see COVID activity hitting us big time. The morgues and funeral homes in Cowlitz County are at capacity. You'd have to get refrigerated trucks to hold the deceased so that they can be treated with dignity.
When Governor Jay Inslee toured the destruction in the burned town of Malden, he brought a gift with him.
The first thing our state did for this community is I delivered to the mayor a box of Honeycrisp apples that Trudy and I picked this morning from the governor's apple tree.
Later, he'd visit the wildfire-rampaged Okanagan County. It's a huge apple-growing community, so the folks there were expecting he'd change tact for that trip.
There's apples everywhere. We're surrounded by apples. It's apple harvest. Surely he'll bring us something different. And surely he did not.
Things got weird when people started to examine the fruit more closely.
My son brought me the apple that I always crack the apples open, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is rotten. This is horrible. Nobody would eat this.
The apples were filled with maggot larvae.
You are a bioreactor facility generating virus and spreading it around, including to kids who can't get vaccinated. I want to reiterate that. If you're a 50-year-old man who, voted for Donald Trump and didn't think COVID was a problem and you don't get vaccinated right now, you arrest every kid in your city. And if that's judgmental, so be it. These folks couldn't run a 2-car funeral as far as I can tell right now. And then they're so incompetent, they can run a 2-car funeral. I got to tell you, these people couldn't run a 2-car funeral. So I am announcing today that I'm a candidate to become the next president of the United States. It's become clear that I'm not going to be carrying the ball. I'm not going to be the president, so I'm withdrawing tonight from the race. We might put your name on the do not handshake list.
Fare thee well, Washington Governor Jay Inslee, after 3 terms announcing he will not seek election to a 4th term, which I think is good news for really democracy and the ability of people to be able to vote for someone else. But I will say that I share some sentiments I already see coming in on the live chat about who might come next. And so what do we know about that? Well, we know for sure, I would give it till the end of the week before Attorney General Bob Ferguson announces that he's not going to run again, or that he is going to run for the governorship. He's just been waiting in the wings. We know King County Executive Dow Constantine, remember, he bowed out already a couple weeks ago, said he's not going to run for the governorship. I'm still waiting to hear what Hillary Franz is going to do, the Commissioner of Public Lands. And I'm certain that there are going to be some other Democrats that we have not thought of who are going to throw their name in the hat, throw their hat in the ring. Are those both?
I think they both work.
Okay, more or less. And then, of course, there's a question of what's going to happen on the Republican side. I really believe that Republicans are getting pretty close, if not already at the point where they can't win a statewide race. So I look forward to seeing who Republicans can muster that have some appeal to the middle. Name recognition on the west side of the state. I don't know that I've heard any that I think, oh, for sure they're going to be able to win where other Republicans in the past have not been able to win. I heard some people saying Lauren Culp is going to run again.
Oh, no.
Lauren, listen.
Please no.
Listen, I've always gotten along with Lauren Culp, although he tried trolling me on Twitter, to which I'm like, I'm the queen of trolling. Don't troll me. Lauren, you lost by 500,000 votes. The answer to what ails our one-party system in Washington state is not finding a candidate further to the right. I know that bothers some people who say they don't want to sacrifice their conservative values and principles, but it's either you're in a position to change some things or you're in a position to change nothing. And I promise if you continue to put up candidates who are further to the right, they're not going to win, and you're just going to hand the governorship over to Bob Ferguson. So please don't do that. Don't do that. Let's see. In related news, though, and I look forward to hearing your comments on Governor Jay Inslee not running again. In related news to Governor Jay Inslee not seeking a 4th term, there is a poll out published in the Seattle Times that says a majority of people want to leave the state of Washington. Let's talk about it. The segment is brought to you by our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org. Make sure to get on their mailing list so you can get alerted to opportunities to make a difference in this crazy state of ours. All right, the article from Gene Bulk, the numbers guy, the FYI guy over at the Seattle Times, the headline, "Slight majority of people in Washington want to leave the state," poll finds. Again, I find a direct correlation here to the fact that Governor Jay Inslee has been the governor for 3 terms, and he puts out this statement about all the wonderful things he's done for Washington state. But I'll tell you, if I had been the governor of a state for 12 years and a majority of people in that state were saying that they would move to another state if they could, I'm not sure that I would consider my governorship a resounding success. So let's dive into some of the reasons here and some of the rationale. And also the fact that this is very divided along party lines. A lot of Democrats like living here. A lot of Republicans and independents do not like living here. So here's the numbers. Again, this is a DHM research poll, but the reporting is from the Seattle Times, fleshing it out. So there were a couple statements that people were asked, whether they agree with or don't agree with. So the first statement, "I would move to another state if my professional and personal situation allowed me to." Only 28% of Democrats agreed with that. 68% of Republicans who responded agreed to that. And then people who either identified as independent or other, 62%. That's significant. So yeah, it's a big chunk of Republicans who say they would want to move somewhere else if their personal or professional situation allowed them to. But 62% of independents? If Republicans don't see that as an opportunity to make some inroads in the 2024 election, I don't know what would clue them into that. The next question was, the cost of living in Washington is worth it for the quality of life. 60% of Democrats said, yeah, cost of living is high, but the quality of life is high and it's worth it. Only 26% of Republicans and only 27% of independents said the cost of living in Washington is worth it for the quality of life. And then there was a group that said they just didn't know, but we'll ignore that. And look, I think that's what really throws me off here is Washington is one of the most beautiful states in the country. And in fact, Seattle 10 years ago, I would have argued was one of the most beautiful cities in the entire world that I had been to. I mean, truly the proximity to the water, the mountain, the climate is so wonderful. But to see it in the state that it's in right now, and that's what really gets to me, is we have this beautiful state. We have beautiful cities and a beautiful landscape, but it is truly being ruined by a variety of issues. The high taxes, the crime rate, something we've been discussing quite a bit. I mean, downtown Seattle, I used to go out there 10 years ago at night. I would never set foot in downtown Seattle after dark unless it was for my job. And so I think as we see the fact that Governor Jay Inslee is just lauding his 3 terms in office at what a wonderful state and a beacon of progress this has become, I would ask the governor where he sees that progress. I mean, is it on the streets of Seattle where we have record homelessness? Is it in South King County where we have record homicide and crime rates? Where is it? Where is the progress that the governor is seeing? Because per this poll, a majority of Washingtonians in your state, Governor Insley, would rather live somewhere else, would rather move somewhere else if their personal or professional situation allowed for it. And that's not just Republicans. That is a huge chunk of independents. So for Democrats, that ought to give you a little pause and a little thought about how we got to this place. And I'll say, for whatever Democrats are going to run for governor, I hope that they realize that there is a whole swath of voters in this state who are deeply unhappy with where things are at. And I hope they can realize that there is more to being a governor than just catering to progressives in Seattle, and that you have a huge state out there where people are dealing with a variety of issues, and you have to try your best to be a governor for all of them. I know that's a difficult task, but I think that's something Insley fell woefully short on, is realizing that Seattle is more than just appeasing Seattle, or that Washington is more than just appeasing Seattle progressives. All right, that segment was brought to you in partnership with our friends over at Future 42. Turn your frustration into action at future42.org, and make sure to sign up for their newsletter so you can be alerted to opportunities to make your voice heard, like the public safety rally we had down in Olympia, which we did in partnership with Future 42. Okay, in another related story to people not wanting to live in Washington state, and we sit here and wonder, oh, why is that? We have been talking about the urgent need to recriminalize hard drug possession in Washington. It was, like I would say, the number 2 job of lawmakers this legislative session. They had 4 months to do it, and they could not come together, and by they, I mean Democrats gave in to the progressive wing of their party, and they could not come together and get enough votes to pass a common sense law that would criminalize hard drug possession while, yes, trying to make sure that people who are in the throes of an addiction crisis get help. But sometimes people need a little encouragement to get help in the form of a law enforcement intervention. And so there have been common sense lawmakers, common sense mayors, common sense county executives and sheriffs that have come together and said, look, we have to get a law on the book before our existing law around drug possession sunsets as of July 1st. And even in the city of Seattle, there is some recognition that this needs to be done, because what's happening is all these cities and counties, they're preparing for the possibility that July 1st comes, there's no bipartisan agreement to recriminalize drug possession, and then it's just de facto legalized. So you have counties and cities who are saying, okay, we're going to pass our own laws so that if the state fails on this, then we can start enforcing our own laws around public drug use and public drug possession. And a variety of cities have done this. This is not a partisan issue. This is a bipartisan issue. Cities like Bellingham, which is a progressive utopia, cities like Marysville, Spokane, I mean, across the ideological spectrum, mayors have stepped up to do this. And I was really happy to see last week in the city of Seattle, City Attorney Ann Davison was joined by 2 of the only council members with a lick of common sense in Seattle. And Ann Davison said, look, we have to have an ordinance on the books in case the worst happens on July 1st.
The drug abuse epidemic is a humanitarian crisis that deserves just as much urgency as we gave to the COVID-19 pandemic. Instead, every day, people on our streets are dying of overdose and drug-related harm. It's time to face the facts. What we've been doing these past years isn't working. Year over year, overdose deaths rose by 72%. And no neighborhood has been untouched by the scourge of the drug abuse epidemic.
And those are just facts. When I hear Ann Davison talking, I hear the voice of someone and the words of someone who actually cares about whether people are dying on the streets. This is not controversial. You're allowing, with these progressive policies and this soft on crime approach, you're allowing people to literally die in the gutter. And you call that compassion. And even the city of Seattle, Ann Davison, and I'll also play from the 2, thank God these 2 are on the council, although Alex Peterson isn't running for his seat again, but Sarah Nelson and Alex Peterson, who have a lick of common sense and understand that, yeah, this is not acceptable where we have allowed things to come to.
Complacency is no longer an option. Cities have laws and enforcement to dissuade activity that's harmful to ourselves and to others, just like speeding in school zones and unlawful possession of firearms. And public use of deadly drugs should be no exception.
It's not okay for people to smoke fentanyl or to use other illegal drugs in our public spaces or on our public transit. And the laws on the books need to reflect those basic health and safety standards. So everyone knows the Wild West is no longer acceptable in Seattle. Children walking to school, customers shopping at stores, workers coming downtown to their jobs, transit riders taking the bus and the light rail, tourists wondering whether they will bring their families back to Seattle. None of them should think that City Hall is okay with people smoking fentanyl or meth on our public sidewalks.
Of course not. Nothing that he just said right there is controversial in the slightest. No, people shouldn't be able to just open air use drugs on our public transit. No, people shouldn't be able to smoke drugs in alcoves of struggling businesses. No, tourists shouldn't have to worry that their children, when they're walking down the street in the heart of the city, are going to be exposed to someone shooting a drug into their arm. In what universe have we allowed that concept to be controversial? And I think the good news is there is an increasing number of elected leaders who are pushing back against that narrative and saying, no, it's not compassionate to let people use drugs out in the open. That's just simply not compassionate. And you have to have a law enforcement intervention, at least on the books, to deal with people who refuse to get help for themselves. So I was pretty, I don't know if stunned is the word, disgusted might be a better word, to see the reaction to this proposal for Seattle to actually enforce a law about no substance abuse in public. One of the only Seattle City Council members that's running for re-election this year is Tammy Morales, and she represents the area in South Seattle. And she's just an uber progressive, I would call her borderline socialist, not too far off from Shama Sawant when it comes to her worldview. Somebody on Twitter shared this, video of this press conference with Ann Davison and the two council members saying, hey, we got to do this. It's for the best of the city. And this person wrote, they tagged all of the council members and said, the council members who were not present at that press conference. And they said, get on board with this. It's not too late to salvage your reputations. Mayor of Seattle, thanks for your work cleaning up Seattle. We're behind you. This was the response to that from Councilwoman Tammy Morales. The response to someone, presumably a citizen, saying, get on board with this, salvage your reputations, get on board with this common sense idea that we actually have to enforce laws around drug abuse. 2 words, hard pass. Hard pass. Well, I will tell you, Councilwoman Morales, what I think about your re-election bid. Hard pass. I'll tell you what I think about 4 more years of you contributing to the downfall of a once great city. Hard pass. This can be a transformative year for the city of Seattle, truly. There are 7 council seats that Seattle voters will get to decide on. The vast majority of them, they don't have incumbents running again. So you really have an opportunity to put new people in those seats. Unfortunately for the people in Seattle's 2nd district, they have a council member who's decided to run again, who has contributed to the vilification of police, who defended the actions of rioters in the summer of 2020, and who now says hard pass to doing the bare minimum to deal with the drug crisis, who says hard pass to helping people who are dying on the streets of our city, who are living in squalor on the streets of our city, who are shooting up a drug called tranq that can actually erode their flesh and lead to amputations. And when it is suggested that we should put the bare minimum tool in place in order to help incentivize those people to save their own lives, Councilwoman Tammy Morales says hard pass. And I really hope that Seattle voters, come November, will say hard pass to that brand of politics, because she simply has no place at Seattle City Hall. Okay, I want to introduce today the newest sponsor on the unDivided podcast. Nicole, I got to bring you in because I'm feeling very adultish today. Do I look adultish?
You always look adultish, Brandi.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's no secret. I'm like, I'm 34 now, I'm about to be 35.
Yeah.
And Mike and I are getting married in September. And so, marriage comes with combining some things and some finances and all of that. And I live with Mike, and I've lived with him for 3 years. And so we're going about that process. And then I had an opportunity to add First Mark Insurance as a sponsor on the podcast. And you know about them well because Dory would always talk about the First Mark Challenge when he was on the radio. And so I thought, well, actually, this is great timing because Mike and I knew the house was woefully underinsured. And we knew we had to bundle our little lives, our little insurance lives together. And I will say, I'm a little embarrassed after having gone through the First Mark Challenge, which I'll talk about in a moment, because we're adding First Mark Insurance as a sponsor on the podcast, which I'm really excited about. But I was a little embarrassed because I've always gotten just the cheapest, quickest insurance. I mean, I didn't
that's what you
didn't get like the general, right? No offense to anybody who does, but like I would get whatever I could get on my phone, like a little app.
Okay.
And I mean, maybe that's just very immature of me, but I had never really spent time figuring out, am I undercovered? And what I realized in going through the First Mark Challenge, because Mike and I went through the full-on official process where and I'll have Dave Taylor with First Mark explain it momentarily, but I was a little embarrassed how underinsured we were. And I was a little mortified by it because we work hard. You know, we've worked very hard. I mean, Mike, he works like 90 hours a week. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many hours we work, but I'm like, we are trying to build a life and we are not protected if something happens to us. And I was kind of mortified by the fact that we were so underinsured. So Mike and I went through the First Mark Challenge. I am proud to say that we are now official members of the First Mark family. And we got above and beyond the insurance that we had previously for about the same price. We got way more for about what we were paying previously, which was awesome for us. But if you're interested, we're going to be adding First Mark Insurance, as I said, as a sponsor on the podcast. But I wanted, here's Dave Taylor. He's the CEO of First Mark Insurance, and he is going to explain to you, since we're introducing them on the podcast today, what the First Mark Insurance Challenge entails.
At the end of the First Mark Challenge process, you will know you have the correct coverage at a competitive price from a carrier that will be there when you need them. So here's a quick overview of the 4-step process so you'll know what to expect. Step 1 is a phone call where we will gather the information we need in order to go to work for you, including listening to your unique story and learning about what matters to you. In step 2, our team will engage with over 20 different companies to see who's the best fit for your specific insurance needs. Step 3 will be another phone call where we will share our findings, make recommendations, and answer any questions you have. Sometimes those findings may lead to a recommendation to stay with your current provider for the time being and just make a few changes to your coverage. Most often though, we will be able to find you a better option, and our recommendation will be to move from your current carrier over to First Mark. In this scenario, step 4 will be the onboarding process where we collect your signatures, issue your policies, and introduce you to the entire First Mark support team that will be here for you moving forward. I encourage you to go to our website, firstmarkinsurance.com, and take the First Mark Challenge today and see what you've been missing out on.
Do it. Take the First Mark Challenge. I'm a little embarrassed to admit that I was just not fully into adulthood with my insurance.
To be fair, you didn't own a lot of things. It was pretty much just car.
And
right?
now I'm adopting Mike's things,
yes,
right?
And you're accumulating things as a couple. So to be fair, you didn't need it as much.
But now that I'm in adulthood, so I took the First Mark Challenge. I'm now officially part of the First Mark family. And now First Mark is part of our family on the unDivided podcast. You see what I did there? So I'm so excited about adding them. Thank you to Dave Taylor for taking me through the process. And so if you're interested in taking the First Mark Challenge, go to firstmarkinsurance.com. Okay, let's get to my favorite segment. And I think your favorite segment too. It's our segment, Unbelievable. Boop! Just when I thought Washington State really was just outdoing itself on the insane proposals front, I had to, when I first saw this article out of Oregon come across my timeline, I had to look up multiple different sources because I was like, there's just no way that they introduced this. I thought it was the Babylon Bee because it could have easily been a Babylon Bee article. So several lawmakers in the state of Oregon have introduced a bill that would essentially legalize camping. Here's the article. Oregon bill would decriminalize homeless encampments and propose penalties if unhoused people are harassed or ordered to leave. And in fact, the bill would allow homeless individuals to sue you for up to $1,000 if you harass them or order them to leave somewhere where this bill would lawfully allow them to be. To weigh in on the true insanity of this is Kristen Olson. She is the host of the Rational in Portland podcast. Kristen, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Brandi, for asking me. It's great to be back on.
I'm starting to worry about Oregon. Are you guys doing okay down there?
You're starting to worry.
Well, I was only worried about Portland, and now I'm worried about Oregon as a whole.
I know. You know what, Brandi? Our city of Portland is actually doing okay. We have a relatively moderate overall city council. But I think you're right. I think the issue right now is our Oregon state legislature. For Pete's sake, we've got this woman named Con Pham, who those of us in the centrist community describe as one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. And she's, as you know, she's got this bill that's out. It's made national, probably international media, Oregon House Bill 3501, which is called the Right to Rest Bill, which allows homeless people to sleep in public places wherever they want. And if it's like, say, a campground where you might pay a fee to camp out there, you're required to have a space where homeless people can sleep.
Wow. So there's this added element, and we'll just kind of like flesh out the bill before we discuss what the implications of it would be. There's an added element that if you harass a homeless individual who is, using this bill to be able to camp even in a public space, that they can sue you for up to $1,000. What's deemed harassment, I guess?
Well, basically, they call it things like terror. They use words like terrorizing. I think it's going to be subjective to the extent that this thing gets any kind of legs, and that's really scary. So then it's really just up to whoever the fact finder is. Is it the judge? Is it the jury? Do they think that the homeless person was in fact harassed, terrorized? You can't cite them. So it gets rid of the idea that you could criminalize any of this, which under Martin versus Boise, we're able to do that Ninth Circuit ruling that kind of really gets us West Coast cities right now. We are actually able to go ahead and criminalize camping as long as we have adequate shelter space. But none of us can get it together or want to get it together, it seems like, to just put together a simple database and prove that we have shelter space. I don't know about Seattle. Portland has tons of shelter beds because nobody wants to use them.
Yeah, because a lot of the shelter spaces aren't, you can't be on drugs or whatever, low barrier. They're not low barrier. And so people are like deciding, well, do I want to keep doing drugs or do I want to be in a shelter space? And so oftentimes, and you're right, it is hard. You have outreach workers go out and offer 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times, hey, we have shelter space. And then people refuse it, which is unfortunate. Now, I think just from a realistic perspective, is this bill something that has even remotely enough support to become law?
It's important to note this. So right now, what our legislators are telling us is that this bill is dead. In fact, Representative Emerson Levy, a Democrat in Central Oregon, tweeted last night, this bill has been dead since March. She doesn't support it. But of course, people are nervous because there's actually a hearing on the bill on May 4th. So people are thinking, okay, if the bill is dead, why is there a hearing? Well, it doesn't have a work group. It's not authorized to move forward, but it's still going to get a hearing. So we're encouraging people to show up and testify at this hearing, because the point is, even if and it sounds like it will be dead, it sounds like it doesn't have enough support to move forward, and that probably since March, this representative is correct. However, people should still show up at this May hearing because this bill will be resurrected. How do I know that? In 2001, we had a very similar bill. So this thing keeps cycling through over and over again. And what we don't want to have happen is have that thing go through. And here's why. Brandi, as you know, I'm a member of that North America Recovers Coalition. That's how we got connected, was at a gala for that. And that coalition, our belief is we need incentives for people to get treatment, and that will help us get them off the streets. And if you get rid of our attempts to criminalize homelessness, and what do I mean by that? I mean providing people with an incentive to get off the streets because their brain has been hijacked by mental illness and drugs. So if you say, look, you can't sleep here, you can go to detox and rehab, or you can go to a mental hospital and get on medication, and they say no, then yes, the alternative is you're in jail. That's the old school way. We always did it. That was back when our streets and our sidewalks were clean, before our tent favelas.
Yeah. The implications, if something like this were to become law, which I agree with your interpretation that the ruling out of Boise seems to sort of nullify this idea that you can camp anywhere at will with no option for someone to get around that. But what confuses me is, and maybe your legislature works different, in our state, when a bill is DOA, no one's giving it a hearing. And so I share the concern that it's even getting a hearing, but I think it's really good for people to just show up or voice their opinion against it anyway, just to put it to bed.
Yes.
You mentioned that you think things are okay in Portland. I've heard conflicting reports, I guess, out of what's going on, but what things have been improved, I guess, in Portland that you think are working?
Well, okay, compared to, how things normally are. I mean,
All
so
relative,
it's
right?
right. That's right. It's all relative here in apocalypse land. So it's much better than it was. We have two centrists on city council, and every once in a Mingus Maps and Renee Gonzalez, every once in a while, they're able to mobilize the rest of city council to do great things. So for instance, the police wanted body cameras. City said no, absolutely not. And you're going to want to review it before you write your report. We ended up we went through arbitration. It was long, hard fought, very difficult, very prolonged. There was a compromise where the police can review their report if it's a small incident. If it's an incident involving any kind of use of force, certainly deadly force, anything like that. That was the compromise that the police made. They agreed we will not review the tape if it's that kind of an incident. After that, the city has to do an ordinance. So last week, the mayor proposed an emergency ordinance to outfit the police with body cameras consistent with this compromise that was long, hard fought that they came up with. Now, Portland was the last big city in America that did not have police wearing body cameras. These are standard accountability tools. We can all agree the police accountability, I think, is a cornerstone of our democracy. And it's just a matter of some kind of balance between law and order and appreciating our police and trying to do for them the kinds of things that they want that are within reason, which I think body cameras totally are. It's a great compromise between police accountability and the kinds of things that the police are asking us for to keep them safe. And city council came together. A bunch of us testified, including me, in favor of these body cameras. We outnumbered the police abolitionists, and city council came together, and this passed unanimously. I mean, this never would have been possible a year or two ago.
It's odd that police, like sort of the anti-police types, you're saying that they didn't want body cameras, because in Seattle, when body cameras first came up, it was the exact opposite, where they were like, oh, we need police, everything they do to be on camera. So that's kind of an odd thing. Is it just they didn't want the further investment?
Well, here's what they argue. So they will not admit that they ever wanted this. But if you look back to, when BLM movement began, that they were asking for body cameras, even in Portland, the police abolitionists and the anti-police crowd, the Antifa people. What happened was all these other cities started implementing it, and it didn't end up being the tool that these abolitionists thought it was going to be to really nail the police, because it turned out it exonerated the police in a lot of instances. I think fairly, because as Jonathan Cho says, video don't lie. Yeah. So they got upset about that. And then they were using tools like, well, we don't want you to review it before you write your report. That I also didn't really understand. I mean, the argument was things like, you're going to change your report to make it comport with the video. And it was just it was sort of like, fine, if you want to use the body cameras, you can have them, but we need another way to get you. And the way we're going to get you is we're not going to let you review the video of what happened. I mean, you can imagine this, Brandi. I've talked to some of these police. They will tell you heat of the moment, when shots are firing, when they're having to think on their feet, when somebody's grabbing a gun. I mean, this happened with a police officer not too long ago. Somebody was grabbing a gun out from underneath his car seat, and it turned out not to be a gun, but the officer didn't know that. He bopped him over the head with the butt of his pistol, had to think relatively quickly. If he had been wearing a body camera, he wouldn't be able to review that footage. But probably your report is not going to sound just like the video, because you were in the heat of the moment and your adrenaline was insane. So that's just another way to get the police. So that was their compromise. It was like, fine, if you're going to wear body cameras, we'll get you in another way. You can't review your report. And then when you get up on cross-examination, we will play the tape and say your report doesn't reflect this. Isn't that true?
Yeah, that's exactly what's going on. And that's ridiculous. And the idea that you would equip them with these cameras and they can't utilize them to go back and get a moment of clarity to look at what happened is just so typical. So, Kristen, how can people listen to your podcast, and tell them, if they're not familiar with it, what it's about?
Thanks, Brandi. It's called Rational in Portland. You can listen to it anywhere you find your podcasts, and you can find me on Rational and PDX on Twitter.
I love it. Well, keep up the good fight down there.
Thank you. You too.
I love Kristen. We need more rational in insert name of West Coast city. We need more people like Kristen, who is indeed rational in Portland, which is apparently a very rare thing. But again, if you missed the beginning leading into that interview, Oregon lawmakers introducing a bill that would not only decriminalize homeless camps, but would allow homeless individuals to sue you for up to $1,000 if you harass them when they are camping somewhere. The bill legally allows them to camp. Even if this bill is DOA, as some Democrats in Oregon have suggested, it is still important to push back forcefully against the mere concept of bills like that being introduced and make it so shameful to do so that lawmakers down the line will think twice. It is truly unbelievable. All right, are you in the market to sell your home, contemplating it, thinking about it, but wondering kind of the state of the market right now as it's been all over the place? Well, check out sellwithwest.com. Again, sellwithwest.com, and our fabulous sponsor, West Jones and Associates. And they can tell you about their innovative marketing strategy to get the most possible eyeballs on your listing to get you the best possible price. They'll list it locally, they'll list it internationally, so as many people as possible are seeing your home. And I will say I had Wes in at the studio and we had a conversation about the state of the market. And, we were talking about how, yes, of course, the market has been all over the place since its high highs. And I asked him, if you have someone who needs to sell their home, should they wait a little longer, or is there a window of opportunity right now? Here's what he said.
What I know right now is that today it's a pretty solid time. If you are listed on the market, you are likely to be one of the only homes for sale in your neighborhood. And that is a fantastic position to be in. Where are we at in 3 or 4 months? Well, if interest rates go up, buyers have less purchasing power and homes will probably take longer, which means that you will likely be competing against more of your neighbors.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, just visit sellwithwest.com, reach out to Wes Jones, and get his advice on whether it's the right time to sell your home. They also have a neat little handy tool there where you can figure out what your home's value is. It might be more than you think. So if you want to sell your home faster at a higher price with fewer contingencies, visit sellwithwest.com, sellwithwest.com, a better way to sell your home. All right, let's escape outside of Washington state for a moment and talk about what's happening in Montana right now, which is really the exact opposite of what's been going on in the state of Washington around transgender youth and care for transgender youth. So the governor of Montana has signed a bill, Senate Bill 99, which will take effect on October 1st, and it prohibits healthcare providers from providing any sort of gender care to minors. So that includes cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, gender reassignment surgery, for instance. Now, there are some exceptions if you get any of those services for some sort of diagnosed specific medical disorder related to sex development. But again, here you have, and I will say about this, because I have been pretty clear on this. When I oppose Senate Bill 5599 in Washington state, which would allow kids of any age to run away and go to a shelter and say, hey, I'm here for gender care, and then that shelter would hide your location from your parents. I'm opposed to that. I'm also opposed in Washington state to the mere idea that minors can get those sorts of treatments without the consent or knowledge of their parents, because I think it's cutting parents out of what is a really important process at a time when these kids are too young to be making life-altering decisions, medical decisions. And so for the same reason I'm opposed to Washington state cutting out parents in those decisions, I'm also opposed to Republican governors who have taken that choice away from parents by saying no one under the age of 18 can get any of these sorts of treatments. I think it is a decision that the government should leave up to parents and their kids. And so I have to be morally consistent on that issue. But this has been a really interesting debate to watch play out in Montana. There is actually a transgender lawmaker in Montana who has announced that she is now suing the state of Montana because she spoke out forcefully against this bill, accusing, saying that if they passed it, they would have blood on their hands. And her Republican colleagues were very upset by that, and they wanted her to apologize for saying it. And when she wouldn't, they censured her, and now she's suing over that censure. But she did have this to say over the whole controversy about her previous statements.
I spoke on the governor's amendments to Senate Bill 99, which banned gender-affirming care. This was a bill that was one of many targeting the LGBTQ community in Montana. This legislature has systematically attacked that community. We have seen bills targeting our art forms, our books, our history, and our health care. And I rose up in defense of my community that day, speaking to harms that these bills bring and that I have firsthand experience knowing about. I have had friends who have taken their lives because of these bills. I have fielded calls from families in Montana, including one family whose trans teenager attempted to take her life while watching a hearing on one of the anti-trans bills. And in that hearing, our caucus pleaded with the Republican chair of the Judiciary Committee to not allow certain testimony, to keep decorum. And we were told a lot of people have a lot of opinions on these things. So when I rose up and said, there is blood on your hands, I was not being hyperbolic. I was speaking to the real consequences.
Yeah, so her Republican colleagues wanted an apology, and then they would, kind of forget about the censure if she apologized for saying that they had blood on their hands, which they took issue with. And now she's saying not only will she not apologize, but like I said, she's going to sue them, calling it an affront to her rights under the Constitution and, quote, more importantly, the rights of my constituents to just representation in their own government. The Montana State House is the people's house, not Speaker Reiger's, and I'm determined to defend the right of the people to have their voices heard. So interesting to watch this debate play out. And again, gosh, there's got to be an in-between point between the state of Washington saying, yeah, if you're 13, go ahead, run away to a shelter and cut your parents out of your medical decision-making. That's cool. And a state like Montana saying, absolutely not, you can't do any of this under the age of 18, even if you talk to your parents about it and your parents think it's the right thing for you. I just think that we've gotten, for Republicans, and I'm going to lump DeSantis into this as well, I think in their efforts to push back against some of the wild policies in states like Washington around these issues, I think they've taken things too far in a way that really challenges what is supposed to be the underlying fundamental platform of Republicans, and that's limited government interference in your lives. And so I think that they are, I don't know if it's knowingly or unknowingly, sort of going against what they are supposed to be at the core of their party. Again, limited government, small government, limited government intrusion. And so I think, like I said, we have to find a happy medium between, oh, you can never do this at all under the age of 18, even with your parents, or yeah, run away from home and do this. It's got to be, it's just, I don't think either of those two tactics make sense. So that's what's happening in Montana. All right, we're going to get to your comments from the day coming up in just a moment. But first, eastsideweightlossclinic.com, eastsideweightlossclinic.com. It's how I've lost 35 pounds since November on the program, almost all of my COVID-19 weight. And in fact, I'm not going to say who it is because I didn't ask her if I could talk about her on the podcast, but I was with a friend of mine a few days ago, and today is her first day on the Eastside Weight Loss Clinic plan. So good luck. You can do it. It's not easy. It's not magic. You got to eat less than you did. I had to eat less than I did when I gained 42 pounds in just a couple of years during the pandemic. But if you enjoy structure as part of a diet, you need some accountability to someone, this one's great. And there's no prepackaged meals. You just eat real food. In fact, usually when I go out to eat, I can find something that's just fine on the plan. You don't have to go get weighed at a doctor's office, which is also nice. You can do the whole thing on the app they give you on your phone, which is great. And I'll just note, there's 2 months until summer. I lost most of my weight in 2 months. So if you're trying to get into bikini shape or whatever, or I wear one piece because I'm older now. I feel like I'm in good shape, but I'm not going to wear a bikini, bathing suit shape. You still have time. So go to eastsideweightlossclinic.com, eastsideweightlossclinic.com, and sign up for a free 15-minute consultation with Dr. Ryan Coogan. And he'll tell you if the program's right for you. He'll explain how it works, and then you can just be off and running and time for summer. It'll be great. eastsideweightlossclinic.com, Dr. Ryan Coogan, DC. Results may vary. Okay, let's get to your comments from the live chat today on Governor Jay Inslee announcing he is not going to seek a fourth term. Weiscastle writes on locals, we need to party as hard as possible before the new disappointing candidates are announced. Yeah, you might have a couple days to get that partying in. Baddie Job JJ Fam on locals, I don't know if that's right, writes, good riddance. I'm really praying for some great candidates to fix this path we have been drug along. I think that's a good way to say it for those of us who feel like we haven't consented to this style of governance. Matthew on YouTube says the alternative, if it's Ferguson, is, quote, meet the new boss worse than the old boss. I think that the most effective pushback to Ferguson for whoever might run against him is he is an extension of the Inslee administration. If you want 4 more years of Governor Inslee, great. Vote for Bob Ferguson. Sharon writes, not all progress is good. Have you seen gas prices lately? 100%. You know, they want to call things progress like the carbon tax that the governor pushed through, which is leading directly to the rise in gas prices in Washington state. And they want to call that progress, but it's progress at what cost? And again, progress at any cost and for any reason is not progress, okay? Crafty Grandma on YouTube. I like that. What kind of crafts do you do, Crafty Grandma? Focus on the positive. The Kraken won their first round of the playoffs, which is so exciting. As a Minnesotan, a native Minnesotan who grew up watching hockey above all else, I love that Seattle has a hockey team.
Have you been into it?
I've been watching. Yeah, I've been watching. I'm into any sports when I'm there in person.
Yes.
But I was following the last couple games.
There's
That's
been
so
a couple
exciting.
cool storylines to come out of it. Like the kid, they got to play his first NHL game at a playoff game, and his parents spent 9 hours trying to get to Colorado after he got the call.
Yeah.
And then they got there 3 minutes late to the game, and right after they got there, he scored.
Oh my gosh, I love
his first goal. It was the coolest story. I loved it.
You know which storyline I love?
What?
That Russ and Sierra were all like, "Go Colorado Avalanche," and then we took them down.
The memes were great. Yep.
I love it. It's good. Let's see. Pat says, "Run, Brandi. Run from what?" Oh, run for office.
Run for office.
Okay. Gotcha. You know, I have my days.
Your days when you're thinking about it, and your days where you're not.
No, my days where my brain's not working.
Oh,
my blonde moments.
Getting everybody excited, Brandi.
Yeah, sorry. Aaron on Patreon writes, "Happy Monday. You were right." Here's my crow that I didn't eat. I think you're talking about Inslee. There you go, a little crow. I need to name my crow. Aaron says, "Happy Monday. You were right. I was wrong. I'll eat it. Just a crap ton of money he leaves to the Bob." I don't know. Can he just transition his money over to Bob? Or you mean like future? I don't think he can transition his money to Bob Ferguson, right? Or can he?
Well,
I have
if
to look
it's
into that.
Donated to the party, I wouldn't.
Well, I don't know. I
see
gotta
why
look
not.
into that. I'm not 100% sure. And he talks about the Seattle Times poll. It should make it crystal clear that Republicans must prioritize effective messaging, effective communication, and outreach to the people who are not politically involved. The governor's race needs to be prioritized here, and they cannot continue infighting within the party. That's a tough thing because you do have this really bizarre, ineffective infighting in the Republican Party where you have what I think is a small faction of the party that truly believes going further to the right is the answer. Like digging in because they see Democrats going further to the left and continuing to win. And they think that the response to that in a blue state is to go further to the right. It's not. And again, I'll go back to what I said at the beginning. You can, you can call him a rhino. I hate the word rhino. But if you have someone who's moderate and who can capture the independent vote, you can have someone in the governor's office who will at least agree with you on some things. Are you going to agree with them on everything? No. But you can either have a quote-unquote rhino or a full-blown Democrat. Which would you rather have? And I almost think it's like out of spite where they don't like moderate Republicans because they feel like it's a traitor to their party. And so they want to take down moderate Republicans, to prove a point? And then you just hand things over to Democrats? That's what happened in Washington's 3rd Congressional District. You lost a whole congressional seat because you wanted to punish Jamie Herrera Butler for voting to impeach Trump after years of solid conservative votes and values. And what do you get now? You have a progressive Democrat. And so what was it worth it? It doesn't make any sense to me. Anyway, the Republican Party needs to get its you-know-what together. It's bizarre to me that they listen or even entertain these voices who are like, go further to the right, no rhinos. Tim on Patreon says, Inslee promised no new taxes when he was first elected, which is hilarious. He did. That's just great to me. He raised taxes on everything. He was in charge when our psychiatric hospital lost accreditation. True. He promised mental health facilities by 2023. Where are they? True. He had little to say about the riots and stupidly sat behind his desk and denied knowing anything about CHOP. True and true. Millions upon millions of dollars lost under his watch by DSHS. His carbon tax is putting an even bigger squeeze on particularly those of limited means. So true. It goes on and on. Goodbye and good riddance. GOP citizens of this state need a viable candidate. I could not agree more. But again, you have to come to terms with reality. And Republicans have not done well in statewide races. And so the Republican Party, and look, I'm not a political strategist, but I like to think I know something about politics in this state, and Republicans need a complete overhaul of their messaging. Okay, I'm going to put the crow down because I don't know why I'm sitting here holding on to my crow for those on the video stream. They need a complete overhaul of their messaging. And again, you can either, as Republicans, be in a position to change some things, to influence some things, or you can be in a position to influence nothing. And you're dangerously close to being in a position to influence nothing. And so if you are not doing everything you can to appeal to the middle, to independence, to common sense people right, left, and center, then you are not doing what you need to do to be in a position to influence something. The Republican Party today should be running ads in Washington state trying to define itself, because Democrats are going to spend the next year and a half defining you as mega right-wing extremists, the party of Trump, the party that hates women, the party that hates transgender kids and the LGBTQ community. You need to do a better job of defining yourself and who you are as a party in Washington state, and bifurcating yourselves from the national party. And if you don't do that, you're not going to win. And I'll send, you can send me, I'll give you my address for the check you can send me for that awesome political advice. Let's see, a couple more. Bob on YouTube says, Tiffany Smiley for Washington governor. Look, I like Tiffany. She's a nice woman. She cares a lot. She has a great background and a great story. What?
Oh, I was just going to say you could use that as a little tease. She's coming in soon.
Oh, okay. Nicole's like pointing. I was like, what? Yeah, we'll have Tiffany Smiley in studio soon. But she just lost a statewide race badly. She lost badly. And unless there's some significant shift, why would we think that she could win a statewide race for 2 years later? That doesn't make any sense. Although I've always said that Tiffany Smiley should not have challenged Patty Murray. She should have waited and challenged Maria Cantwell. Maria Cantwell is milquetoast. She is ripe for the picking.
Yes. And so don't you think maybe that was just the wrong race? That's what this person is saying, run Tiffany Smiley. Because I think that even though she definitely lost, I think that there was a lot of momentum behind her.
Yeah, no? But she lost significantly. And so again, I think that there has to be some sort of shift. One of the pitfalls, I think, of Tiffany's campaign is, again, she allowed Patty Murray to define her all summer before the election, before she really defined her own campaign and herself on Roe v. Wade. Tiffany Smiley's camp, we all knew Roe was going to fall. And so they should have had good messaging ready the day that Roe fell and ads all over TV. And what did they do? Instead, they let Patty Murray define her on abortion all summer long. And it wasn't until after the primary that Tiffany Smiley came out with a wonderful, rock-solid argument on abortion saying, I'm not a Democrat. I'm not going to overturn the will of the people, and the will of people in the state is reproductive rights. And that's a great message. But it was 3 months too late. And so again, you just let Democrats, we already know how Democrats are going to define every single, you can tell I'm passionate about this, because to me it's so freaking obvious. You know how Democrats today are going to define every single Republican candidate. They're going to call them MAGA Republicans. They're going to go after them for reproductive rights. And now they're going to go after them for hating transgender kids and wanting transgender kids to commit suicide. There it is. There's the Democratic playbook. New playbook, same as the old playbook. And we already know what Bob Ferguson is going to run on. He's the one who's going to take on Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans, and he's the one saving your kids' lives by banning semi-automatic assault weapons. So you know what he's going to do. So get your messaging together today. It should already be in the can. You should be running ads. You don't have to wait till election season to run ads as a party, to get out, to outreach voters. Sorry, I'm ranting, I'm raving, I'm ranting. I just get so mad about this stuff because it's so freaking obvious. Deep breaths, Brandi.
Why don't they do it then?
Because they're scared of the fringe of the party. I think they are scared. They are completely divided as a party. And they can't get out with a solid message because they don't even have a solid message inside. They don't have any internal unity or any internal consistency in their messaging. So how do you then as a party get out and message externally when you've got a faction of your party that's like, no, that's not how we think. That's not what you're just tearing each other apart. get your shit together. Sorry, get your stuff. Get it together. I'm sorry, parents who are trying to listen.
Bleep.
I'll bleep that on the taped version. Okay. Let's read one more. Amy on Patreon. Now, if only Republicans can find a candidate that is more to the center, this means we will have to compromise and give up some hills to win the battle. Do we know how? Amy, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Amy, you, me, Nicole, strategizing. That's it. You just have to give up some. It doesn't mean that you have to sacrifice your deeply held beliefs. You can still personally be opposed to abortion, as an example. But if you really think that the Republican Party in Washington state sticking firm to that issue is going to win them any seats in the House, the Senate, or the governor's office, I'm sorry, that's just not living in reality. That is not taking into account our current political environment in Washington state. Okay. All right, let's end with sanity check, as we always do, because apparently I really need one today. Go ahead. All right, I wanted to follow up to a commentary I gave last week about Tucker Carlson being 1,000,000,000% right about what needs to happen to save our country and, honestly, to save our state. Here's a little clip of what he posted on social media a few days after he was fired from Fox.
This moment is too inherently ridiculous to continue, and so it won't. The people in charge know this. That's why they're hysterical and aggressive. They're afraid. They've given up persuasion. They're resorting to force. But it won't work. When honest people say what's true, calmly and without embarrassment, they become powerful.
Yeah, and again, I believe he is 100% right about that last part. When honest people say what's true, calmly and without embarrassment, they become powerful. And the point I was making on the podcast, and honestly, this is a point we've been making for a long time, which is we're in a fight between reasonable and unreasonable. And I think reasonable people have been scared into silence too long because they're worried about being attacked. They're worried about being shamed. They're worried about being labeled. And what Tucker says is when we get to a point when honest people say what's true, calmly and without embarrassment, they become powerful. And one of the reasons they become powerful is because they are the majority. They are the majority by far. The reasonable outnumber the unreasonable by far. And I wanted to talk about this at the end of the show because I had a lot of people who are saying, well, Tucker Carlson is not the arbiter of truth. Why would you hold up Tucker Carlson as like the person who gets to decide what's true and what's not? I don't think that Tucker Carlson is the arbiter of truth. I don't think anyone in the media is the arbiter of truth. If there was a time when I believed that, the pandemic ended that for me. I do not believe there is anyone in the media who is truly the arbiter of truth. But reasonable people, when they speak collectively against unreasonable things, can be their own arbiter of truth. And so is Tucker Carlson the best messenger for a call to action on truth-telling? Probably not. But I really don't think anyone in the media is the best messenger for that issue. I think every single person who operates in a zone where they are not driven night and day by a single political ideology is a good messenger and arbiter of truth. If you are capable, and I thought Tucker did a good job at covering things in a way that was independent-minded. Did he get things wrong sometimes? Yeah. But I always felt like he was operating in a way that was independent-minded, that wasn't driven or controlled by a single political party. And that's really the key. For people who can think outside their little political bubble, who can take off the red glasses or the blue glasses for just a minute and look at things outside of that lens, those are the people who we need to speak up, to say what's true, calmly and without embarrassment. Because you will truly become powerful if you do that. So it has nothing to do with Tucker Carlson being the end-all, be-all messenger of truth in this country. But what he said was so spot on, and I think was a good call to action for those of you who are on Team Sanity. All right, that's it for today's episode of Undivided. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to my ranting. I have a feeling that there's going to be some comments about that, and we'll answer them on the show tomorrow. Thank you for your continued commitment to giving Common Sense a comeback. If you have not signed up to support the show, please do so. That's how we continue to do this full time. That's how I pay Nicole to continue to do this full time. You can sign up. Just go to undividedpod.com, undividedpod.com, and there you will find a one-stop shop for all things Undivided, including a link so you can sign up to support the show for as little as $5 a month on Patreon or Locals. All right, that's it, everyone. We will see you back here for the live show at noon tomorrow.